think we can maybe wait a couple more minutes to see if there are latecomers, and then maybe we start a two past whatever time zone you are at the moment, 3 p.m. in my case. So yeah, I'll see you in a couple of minutes. And yeah, have a look at the chat, please. For those that I just post again the message, I'd like to hear from all of you about your background and interest, so that maybe can tailor a little bit my talk. But also going through all of us is gonna take a little bit of time. So if you instead can write on the chat, to be highly appreciated. Thanks, Nat, for doing it already. I'm gonna have a look at your messages as you write, and we'll start the talk in a couple of minutes. Okay, I guess I can start quite slowly. Can you just confirm that you can hear me, maybe with a thumbs up or just a mute for a second, that you can hear me and you can see my slides? If anyone can write on the chat or just give me some sign. Yep, great. Thank you, Sirat. Good. Well, again, welcome to everyone. Thanks so much for finding time to attend this talk. I hope you'll find it interesting. For those of you that are just joining now, and again, if you want to just drop a line on the chat about who you are, what's your background, interest, maybe where you're from, what's your interest in this talk, so I can maybe tailor a little bit the talk. As I will tell later, this is semi-structure. So of course I have a presentation I'm going to go through, but also it's kind of a little bit improvised in the sense that it's my kind of research expertise. So I kind of can take it to places depending also on maybe things that you're particularly interested in. So if there is something that you want me to go more in detail, just again use the chat. Is there open in front of me, so I'm gonna see it all the time. Yeah, I want not necessarily to be talking for 40 minutes, so it's not my ideal scenario. But again, that's just to say, feel free to use the chat, and take the discussion wherever you want. In the sense, if there's something that you want to discuss further, I'm happy to. So let's get started. These are the slides. My screen in the bottom. So if I look in the bottom, it's because there's my screen, my slides are there. So critical dataset studies on how to ethically collect data for a training set. And before starting, probably I should thank WUN for making this possible, Worldwide Universities Network, and TIP from my idol university for being organizing and pulling everything together. And of course, thank to all of you for being here today and listening to this talk. So I want to talk about, first of all, what can you expect from today's webinar. I'm having a look at your comments so far. I see some expertise in the data security, anyway, in data in general, AI. So that's good. I assume that most of you will have some sort of background in artificial intelligence and machine learning. If not, I will just go quickly through a few things that I think are important to follow whatever I'm going to say. But yeah, it's not a comprehensive, in-depth technical explanation of AI. And we are also going to do some philosophy, because ethics is a branch of philosophy, as we're going to talk about later. So again, don't worry if not. As I'll tell in a minute, I also don't come from a philosophy background, so I'll try to make it as digestible as possible. And yeah, and I think I can get started. I introduce myself. My name is Dr. Fabio Morreale. I'm originally from Italy, but I've been working at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, so in the other part of the world with respect to New Zealand, exactly the opposite side. We're working here for 6 years. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Music. So I'm in the music department, but my background is in computer science. So I have a PhD in human-computer interaction, applied to some sort of musical experiences. But anyway, that's my background. So technical background, like I see some of you as well. But in the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, I started looking more into the kind of implications, the ethics of what we're doing, the politics of what's happening, trying to understand a little bit more the kind of a little bit the unspoken issues around disruptive technology, and in particular AI. So that's a little bit the space that I'm from. Okay, objectives for today. I have 2 objectives, particularly. What does it mean to do AI ethically? And also, what are the most common ethical issues with training data sets? Remember that this is focused on, so I just go back to the title, on collecting data for data sets, for training sets, okay? So these are my objectives. And before going to, and also a third thing, how to collect data ethically, as you will see, this is not exactly a recipe book that I'm going to give you. I'm going to advocate against this tendency of having to follow specific frameworks for ethics is not something that I think is going to work. But anyway, how to collect data ethically is a point I want to discuss. In my title, there is this words critical dataset studies. So I want to contextualize a little bit. Is actually a disciplinary field that is focused on identifying the ethical issues and hegemonic power structure of datasets. So as we go through this presentation, keep in mind that it is a branch, it is a disciplinary field about ethical issues and hegemonic power structures embedded into data sets, not only for training sets, right? We are talking about all data sets. So for all of you that are, for those of you that are interested in data sets, this can apply independent on whether the data sets are used to train AI models or not. I made this relatively ugly graph, but I used it's coded. So I don't know if you guys use Mermaid. Is basically you can create this sort of codes with this sort of graphs with coding. So you have limited customization, but it's great because it's just code and change things. So anyway, I have a few graphs that I want to show you to show a little bit, help me explaining, I mean, a visual representation of what I'm going to say. So the focus again is data collection. So all this part here, actually, oh yeah, I can use this thing. Oh, nice. Let's use yellow. Okay, this part here is where we're going to focus. How do I do it now? I don't know how to delete it. Okay, I'm not going to delete it. Data collection is here. That is the part I'm interested in. So there are data, and this represented by CD-ROMs that enter a data set, and this data set can be used to train AI models. It doesn't have to, right? There are other data sets that are used for a lot of other purposes, as you know. Then this data is used to train an AI model. I just this is a very rough representation. Again, most of you know already about it. And then let's say there is some sort of query from the user, and the user queries the AI model that produce some sort of output. I'm interested in the data collection more than the AI models and how it's developed. I'll give you a few examples. Spotify has been my main case studies for many years. Again, I'm also music technology background, so I kind of quite familiar with it. And I want to show you a couple of ways in which Spotify recommends music. Music recommendation, of course, is an artificial intelligence method. There are a few things that Spotify do. The first one is collaborative filtering. So I try to represent collaborative filtering here. Forgive me if it is a bad representation. Anyway, we have a few users. Okay, we have playlists. Try again this thing. We have a few playlists. These are different users, different playlists from different users. And let's assume that in this playlist, this old man and these other two people have they both say, hey, I really like this pink singer and this green singer. And this other person also likes the pink singer and green singer. And another, I don't know, granny here said, hey, I really like pink singer and the blue singer. Of course, there are much more numerals. You normally have, I don't know, dozens of people in a playlist. But the training set is composed of user playlists. What happens is that these train a model that teach Spotify what to recommend. So when our grandma here asks, hey, Spotify, can you tell me something that I like? Well, they say, well, you like pink. These other guys also put pink in the same playlist as green. So it's quite likely that these guys have something in common. So I'm going to recommend green to you. Again, this recommendation, simple artificial intelligence. This is the user query. And again, remember that our focus here is on the dataset collection. So we're focusing on this part. We are collecting data created by users to train a model. So to populate data sets they use to train a proprietary model they use to Spotify to improve their recommendations. Another model for Spotify, another way in which they recommend song is used during some natural language processing. They have this company that I acquired a few years ago called the Neconest that scrape the web looking for reviews from anyone in internet, not only Spotify users, anyone on internet that is writing anywhere that is publicly available, something about music review. There is, on Reddit, on Twitter, on this website, Rate Your Music or Rate Your Album, I can't remember. or Rate Your Music or Album of the Years. There are a few of these platforms where people write reviews, like if it was on Amazon, like when you write reviews, they scrape the reviews. So this person, for instance, said, "Hey, the new album of Pink sounds like I don't know, the Gandalf, like the Lord of the Ring." Okay, and a few people might write in the same things, and then you have other thing. So basically, Spotify learns that this Pink must have somehow some similarities to the Lord of the Rings. Again, this employs some sort of a this deploys some set of bots that crawls the internet, sniffing around for information that is created by user. Okay, these users are completely unaware that their review is used by Spotify in their recommendation system. They are likely not to be Spotify user also, or maybe they are, but they don't have any benefit. As I make the examples, I also gonna start throwing some of the problematic issues that we should look into when we create data sets. But we're gonna go into the problematic aspects specifically later. Again, keep writing in the chat. I know you're very focusing my presentation, but keep writing in the chat if you want about your background, etc. Cool. So that's called, again, natural language processing. The company is called The Econest, if you want to know more. I've written something about it. Anyway, let's have a look at another example. This is image generation. I don't know why it's so small, but anyway, again, it's not my fault. I don't really render. It's automatically rendered these graphs. Leon is one of the image datasets, like ImageNet. I'm going to talk about ImageNet as well. You have a combination in the dataset. So what is the data that goes into datasets? I'll go again in our yellow here. Is a combination of images that are labeled. Somebody took the photo, uploaded the photo, and not necessarily the same person. Actually, most of the time it's not labeled the photo. Humans did this connection, right? So this pair image and label enters training sets like Leon, or I don't know how to pronounce it, Leon. And then things are done with Leon. For instance, Midjourney is supposedly using Leon or any other image training set. It's not important which one they use. So remember, this is the AI model. This is the AI model. So a user can say, hey, can you create an island with an umbrella? And Midjourney can generate it, even if in the training set there is not an island with an umbrella. You have an island, you have an umbrella, and actually can generate an island with an umbrella. Again, this is just for fun, but remember that there's the space here. Remember that our focus is here, right? We are focusing on the fact that what is going into the data set. I really like this tool, by the way. I haven't used it before, because usually I'm teaching in class. Anyway, sorry, I'm going on tangents. What I was saying is that I'm interested in what goes into the data sets and how are the data that goes into the data set created in the first place. So again, these are users that definitely have no idea that they're not just about not having ideas, a little bit more complex. It's worse than that, but they definitely don't know that the photos they took are used to generate new stuff or identify stuff, because this is a it's an image generation system, but there are also image recognition system, is image upscale system. There are all different AI models that use similar data sets. I want to dig deeper on Leon on this data set for a reason. So this is all Leon. Let's focus on this. Leon has a number of images and text as well, but I don't not care too much about it at the moment. Leon is composed of a number of datasets. It's not just one dataset. There are a number of sub datasets. One is called aesthetic, Leon aesthetic. Okay, Leon aesthetic is itself composed of 3 datasets. These are all information that are freely available. And actually, Leon is an open source, and they make it available to everyone, so they disclose everything. Good on them, for some reason. But also, we know very well what's happening here. One of these datasets is called Simulacra Aesthetic Captions. That's the title of it. And this set contains synthetic images. We're going to talk about what synthetic data is later, but basically it's data that is produced by generative AI. So these are already synthetic images that were generated by AI. And these images were rated by users in Discord communities. And they say, hey, can you tell me from 1 to 10 how much you like this one, how much you consider it as aesthetic, as beautiful, etc., etc. And they took the top, I can't remember how much, I don't know, 10%, let's say, images and they say, okay, these are the beautiful images. Everything else is not. Remember, Discord users of AI music, I keep saying music for obvious reasons, of AI, generative AI communities. So people that have done this work here are people that already have a specific demographics, and we're going to take it in a minute. And indeed, the creators of SAC, of the simulacra aesthetic captions, are very well aware of this, of the shortcomings, and they said that the scores were submitted by users who are Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. So weird, there's the acronym weird, and also developers of AI art. So when you ask Midjourney to generate something that looks beautiful, it's probably beautiful in the eye of a very specific group of people. So then when you ask, hey, can you create a photo of a beautiful man? You ask Midjourney, generate something that, I don't know, is probably tailored on something specific. Good. I don't know if I have any other examples. No, I don't have any examples. So we can go to, actually, I can pause a little bit to give you a little bit time to think about it. And also if you want to ask questions, you can go there. I don't want to rush too much. So again, what's happening here? Remember that these are not actual images. Actually, they are actual images, but they are generated with AI. So they are simulacra, probably where it comes from. There are synthetic images. They ask, hey, how much do you like these ones? How much they're beautiful, or et cetera, et cetera. 3, all right, probably not enough. And then this is just a subset of those that are deemed as particularly aesthetically pleasing. Again, 1 minute if you have questions. You can also unmute yourself, by the way. I'm happy for that. Unmute yourself, show your face if you want. Need to be mindful of my hydration as well. All right. Okay, we can go on the next phase that is about trying to understand the problems. The problems. Okay, very boom. I should have put some music. Very dramatic. I categorize, as a scientist, I like categories and stuff into 2 main categories of issues. The first one are, who are the humans in the loop? I use the expression humans in the loop here because it's something that you find in literature. So it means, okay, it's artificial intelligence, but there are humans in the loop. There's a lot of literature around it in which I identify. Oh, by the way, sorry, at the end of the presentation, I have a slide of references. I'm not going to spend time saying who said what, except when I'm quoting directly somebody, and I'm going to do that in a minute. I'm going to quote part from an article. Otherwise, I put all the references in the end. It's not the best practice, but also is a little bit more agile. So I was saying that in the literature, you'll find a lot of studies identifying who are the humans involved in machine learning, especially. Let's talk about that because, of course, artificial intelligence is a lot. There are humans creating data, humans evaluating data, and humans kind of crafting and curating data. Let's put aside the engineers and all the rest of the shareholders, etc. Let's just talk about humans involved into the data. So who are the humans in the loop? From a problematic point of view, because some humans that are in the loop are actually paid to do that, are aware of what they are doing, but there are some humans that are completely unwitting. Unwitting, in case you are familiar with this word, is kind of unaware. If it's not, English is not your main language, like it's not mine, means that are not aware, not conscious of something is going on. They are considered unwitting laborers, people that actually perform labor work that is used, exploited, extracted to create these training data sets that are used by companies, AI companies, to make a profit. This is an article that I wrote last year with a few colleagues of mine, as published in AI and Society. I have the link later, in which we try to define why this is a problematic practice, why the fact that, let's go here, why going on and somehow, I'm not saying stealing, well, I said it, collecting all this information without asking permission, without remunerating people, without telling them that something that this thing is going on and giving them the possibility of not opting out. I'm saying why that should be considered an exploitative practice. to start with, and then what do you do with it? Well, then it goes into the realm of, legality. We're not talking about law in this specific talk. I'm not a law scholar. I'm just talking about, is it ethical? Is it okay that we are exploiting people's humanness? I wrote here, the next word, extracting humanness in the sense their way of being, the what it means to be human, what it means to be able to recognize a pattern between two albums, for instance, right? Because that's what a review is. Say, oh, the new album of, James Blake really sounds like, I don't know, Fortet. Well, this is a piece of my aesthetic taste intelligence that I put there, definitely not to be used by some companies to make a profit out of it. So we're using some post-Marxist framework to post-Marxism framework to frame this as a labor. Definitely a problematic practice. And this is the same thing of, there are so many other examples. You're gonna, if you're interested, you can have a look at it. For instance, when you feel the captcha, the reCAPTCHA to prove your humanness, that's, sarcastic. You have to say, hey, prove that you're human. Can you identify where this fire hydrant in the system? For you is an obligatory passage point to get access to a service. But what is happening is that basically you're improving an AI model at that point. You're not actually training data sets, you're improving an AI model without you being absolutely aware of that. You have no idea that's what's happening. You and me and everyone. The other point I want to talk about, another thing, opting out before we go there, because there's a lot of discussion, especially, in my field, music and art. It's a lot of discussions around, it's not fair that we're using data sets with music that is copyrighted. Again, don't really necessarily care too much about at this point about the legality, but rather, is it fair that we do it? So if you use music that is created by somebody, by anyone, but the intention was not to be used to train AI models, with the extra problematic part that these AI model can generate music to a point that it might also replace the original musician, is highly problematic. So people are starting saying, okay, good. We create data sets that are specifically made by musicians, or musician can opt out. I've seen something about it. I think it was in Stability Audio. Stability, is one of the big generative AI companies. They're doing quite a good job, better than others, at the ethical things, and they have a new incredible music generation system that they just released a couple of weeks ago. It's super good, and they said they allowed musicians to opt out, but it was quite vague, extremely vague. And I mean, again, this is another discussion, but anyway, um, if you do ask consent for musician, again, make sure that there are some actual profound connection and attempts to engage with them. The other issue that I want to identify here related to humans is the thing that I call the oligarchy of taste. Oligarchy, remember that kind of is the power of the few in as a democratic system, as a governance systems. In this case, remember what I talked about here. A very few Discord users are determining what is deemed as pleasant. So what is and what is not visually appealing is influenced by the tastes of a very small group of individuals, and also the processes that are chosen by dataset creators to curate these datasets. So if these are the foundational models that are going to be used also in the future for successive operations, it's important that we pay attention to what are the processes. Asking a Discord community to rate, it seems they're absolutely the easiest, the less thought and developed way of doing it. It's definitely, okay, what is fastest? How can we get? Well, we get just ask the enthusiasts to just rate them. So they're going to do it because they love AI. Well, is it fair? Is it a good distribution? So just questions, right? The other one is about dataset creation. My second main category of problems, dataset creation, and that's particularly related to this topic of today. In another paper that I wrote last year, I think that is the reference in the end, I talk about, especially for generation of music, this concept of terra nullius is a Latin term, but I'm going to try to explain it. Basically, it means the land of nobody. So this point in AI, in the training sets of AI, we are going through a stage that a lot of are considering kind of the Wild West. Everything is available to anyone. You can just get as much as you can. Is all you can eat until the final regulation, right? So it's a land of nobody. The data is something that is out there that is free from to take in and do whatever you want to do it with it. I'm not gonna go into I'm gonna talk about a little bit the ideology behind it in a second, but that's something to consider whether or not you deem as fair, let's keep using the word fair at the moment, to collect data that is just because it's out there that is free from the taking. Problem that I identified as I started my process of try to document and study training sets is that there is a very, very poor documentary practice. What does it mean? That in most of the cases, when an author introduces a new data set or a new AI model based on a data set, they do a really poor job at documenting how these data sets were created, the genealogy, the genesis of these data sets. How were they formed? How were they maintained? How were they altered, utilized? By who are they utilized? Of course, there is a you can't predict in the future. So yeah, I found a very lack of documentary practice in the sense that um, people didn't really say much about. Oh, sorry, future predictions. Say, yeah, you can't really say know how people are going to use it. But then a lot of these articles, remember, that are published in archive, and archive you can update your article. Um, Something very important that I'm kind of wrapping my head around lately is about synthetic data and copyright laundering. So these, I'm gonna point to a resource later if you are interested in this. But basically, data that goes into training sets and data sets in general, remember that is the same thing, can be divided into historical data, so data that is really produced by humans in the first place. We can call it maybe primary data. People are still not agreeing on how to call it. So again, I make a review that is a primary data. I take a photo and I put it on Instagram. I put the song on a playlist. I write a text and it's used by ChatGPT. So human created data. On the other side of the spectrum, there is synthetic data. Synthetic data is basically data that is already generated with AI. So using, of course, some other AI models, there are AI models whose objective is to create data, like I showed you before. Like remember the simulacra static captions. These are um, images that are generated with AI. They're not images that are created by humans. So that's actually quite interesting. And a lot of the synthetic data, I think, are one of the solutions to ethical issues. But sometimes it can be extremely problematic. There is this data set, it's Cosmopedia, it's called. It's composed of 30 million text files. I found this from Edward Newton Rex, by the way, just to name the person, the researcher that is working on this. 30 million text files that are usable for AI, generative AI, that are trained, generative AI training, and are released under a very permissive license that allows commercial use. All right, the data sets of text that say, yeah, you can use it to generate, to train AI models. However, these Cosmopedia data sets, the text that is there was generated using another model that is Mixtral. I think is the Hugging Face model, quite sure, that itself is trained on a huge amount of copyright work without particular permission, all right? So you have first AI models, they train on unpermitted material, they create new text, music, video, images, whatever you have, and this new synthetic data set is used to generate AI. And people starting to say, hey, I'm not sure is fair to do that. Isn't this laundering? Are you just trying to avoid being sued because you're using copyright material and going through an extra step of something that's a little bit, again, it's like money laundering, but applied to data. And I'm surprised I haven't seen more of this because it's pretty much everywhere. So do expect some, I think, hype around this. And please be careful and be aware of this if you're using data sets yourself. Again, using synthetic data that's been trained on copyright material. I don't know. I don't want to throw moral judgments. We're gonna go that in a minute. Fail marginalized communities. I think this example is quite obvious. I guess pretty much. I believe you're familiar with Timnit Gebru, her work on facial analysis. She discovered that facial recognition misclassifies subjects that are non-white. That's because the datasets were trained on white people mostly, and so this, there's probably I'm not going to spend too much time here, but again, if you're creating a data set, try to be aware of including communities that are not necessarily represented in huge amounts. And also the data is mostly trained in English, and there's a lot of consequences that are not just about linguistic, it's also about ways in which like what literature is written in English is mostly scientific well, it's not mostly, but it's a lot of scientific literature and less of other literature that is, extremely important for human knowledge. So that is what I talk about failing marginalized communities. Narrow metaphysics. Sorry, I remember that this is a little bit a philosophy talk, so I'm going to use those philosophy term again. If it's not your space, absolutely fine. I'm going to introduce this thing. So metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that is dealing with the reality. What is the reality? What is real? It goes back to the ancient Greeks in the kind of the Western world. I'm sure there's corresponding in the East. What is reality made of? And when I talk about narrow metaphysics, I want to use here to explain this concept. As I mentioned before, I want to go through a passage from an article called On the Genealogy of Machine Learning Dataset. I think it's brilliant. It's not, I didn't write it. There is a reference in the end. But I want to try to focus here why a narrow understanding of reality when you create datasets can be problematic. So these passages talk about ImageNet. ImageNet is probably the most popular datasets of images, millions or billions of images that are used by a lot of these artificial intelligence models. So ImageNet represents a very particular way of seeing and naming the visual world, one that is shaped by a myriad of socio-technical processes, including digital photography and image sharing practices of the late 2000s, the functionality of web search engines, the imperative for speed and non-reflexivity designed to the dataset curation process, and the situated subjectivities of the annotators themselves. That's, I think, my focus here, the subjectivity of the people that annotated the datasets. It is a view that associate bikinis with women, sports with men, trout with fishing trophies, and lobster with dinner. By failing to account for the particularities of this view, particularities that largely reflect a white Western male gaze, and wielding a naturalistic rhetoric in popular science discourse, the subjective nature of meaning formation and the presence of acts of unreflective interpretation is obfuscated and hidden from view. So these datasets are supposedly representing all human knowledge and the right annotation, but of course there is not a right annotation. It's not a right way of interpreting the world. We are subjective being. We all have, different ways of seeing the world. So the act of putting a label, a text to an image, I mean, it's problematic. It depends on what you're using, right? If you're using to put an alternative text on a web page, say, okay, who cares? But actually, that's used a lot by these scrollers. They're trying to find the alt tag, the alt tag in an HTML file. If browsers can't display the image, they say, okay, what is the image about? So people that, of course, didn't, I myself, when I designed websites in the past, I never cared too much about it. I said, okay, whatever, because I never thought it was going to be used to scrape data and eventually to be used by artificial intelligence, 10, 15 years ago. Who had thought about it? So that's what I talk about, the narrow metaphysics, the narrow understanding of reality and representation of reality. Oh, thanks for the comment. So I just Nat, I just read your comment. We can actually talk a little bit about it in the question and answer. I don't have too much more to go through, so just gonna go through the last slide. It's a little bit longer, but anyway, I want to talk a little bit about, so these are the problems. I have a few suggestions, but before that, I want to talk about understanding AI ethics. So ethics is moral philosophy, all right? So this word is actually, maybe some people might have a little bit different views, but it's moral philosophy. So it has to do with values, it has to do with ideologies. And the very ways, and again, I'm reading a little bit from articles here, the very way in which most data sets are created embeds specific neoliberal values like extractivism and deregulation. There is an example by OpenAI. The CEO of OpenAI said that IP, intellectual property, should be free to use for AI. They basically asked, they said we have to be allowed to use copyright material. So deregulation, right? Deregulation and extractivism are characteristics of neoliberalism. Um, Sorry, I'm just going on. Then I have a little bit, if I remember, I want to make a little connection here. So also ethics as a barrier to progress. So there are human concerns about privacy and data ownership, but as insofar as there are barriers to collecting data. Okay, so for us, for our consumers, they say, well, I don't want my privacy to be there. But on the other side, they say, well, this privacy bullshit, sorry, is something that just making my work slower. I need more, is an obstacle to progress and this sort of thing. So innovation comes first, then comes ethical concerns. And then also what is important when you decide, when a dataset creator decides not to share, to leave unaccounted and unarticulated from what they document about the dataset creation, some specific parts, like how they accumulate it. Of course, this has a political meaning. What is this important for? Why I study from this? I want to say this because since it, okay, let me think how to say that. When you talk about values and ideologies, we know that we don't share. It's not at the war we all share the same ideology. I'm sure that in this room, in this virtual room, we have very different values and ideologies. Like from your names, I can see that we come from, there are probably people from different parts of the world. You might have different ideologies and ways of seeing the world. Ethics is about the good and the bad. Okay, that's the reality of it. But can we say that is the good and the bad for everyone? No, of course not, because it's not. Well, again, to be honest, there are thousands of years of discussion in philosophy about whether there exists some categorical ethical um, positions that are absolutely right, like don't kill. But again, in others, for some cultures, and say, well, don't kill, maybe. Or, in the death penalties, I think, in the States and in many other countries, for instance. So we don't really agree what is good or what is bad. So the same thing happens to the ideology. When I talked about that these ideologies are neoliberal, I'm not saying that our neoliberal does are bad, all right? So they might not be aligned with my ideology, but it doesn't mean that anyone should say, "Oh, this is wrong." I don't, or you might say, "Well, I don't see why it's wrong. If it is free for the taking, I'm just gonna take it. If it requires deregulation, let's go with it." So we have to be quite humble when you are dealing with ethics to kind of step aside from our own conception of ethics and what is right or what is wrong, and being aware that we are biased and try to account for the diversity of it. Of course, if I look at this, as you probably guessed, I find a lot of problems with these things, but it doesn't mean that I want to find consent from everyone. So how do we do that? The other thing I want to talk about is the AI ethics is not engineering. So it's another question I'm going to read in a minute. I want to talk about this. When I presented my work at the conference last year on AI music generation, a lot of creators of AI music generation models came to me and say, "Hey, do you think it's possible to have maybe a framework that I can see to see if my work is ethical or not?" I don't think it's possible. So you can't really expect somebody to develop a plugin for Firefox in which you drag and drop your model and it says how ethical it is, yellow, green, or red, right? So again, the awareness that these are guidelines can be offered, but they're not blueprints. It's not a recipe book that you can follow. And you have actually to um, And at the same time, following guidelines, some people are writing guidelines, don't really absolve engineers from being um, free from taking these sort of considerations. What I suggest is instead, AI ethics is a never ending process of engagement and refinement. Engage with communities. Think who are the people that are going to be affected by your data sets and by the AI model if you're developing the model directly. So the users, most of the time is the users, the user-centered AI, they say, but actually the users are the humans that are involved are those that are going to use your, I don't know, Facebook system, but not who's going to be negatively or positively affected by the model that you are developing. So this process of engagement, refinement, trying to understand different positions, it, being an AI ethicist is going to be one of the, I mean, a lot of commentators will say it's going to be one of the big things in the future because we need these sort of discussions. We are not in a, the society is not ready to just get rid of these discussions. The other thing I want to talk about is that for those that are feel a little bit maybe attacked by this, I don't want to say that the opposite of ethical is not unethical for what I see, but it's aethical. Unethical means that you are aware of that there is a problem that is going on, and you just say, "I know it, I don't care," or "I just," yeah, pretty much that. So unethical, going against some ethical principles. Aethical is the absence, right? Is basically is a space where ethical dilemmas have never been taken place. And in I can again I come from computer science. A lot of my I spent many years of my life in computer science, amazing 20 years in computer science faculties as a student and then as a faculty member. Ethics and this sort of discussion are extremely rarely touched. Maybe one course or maybe half of the course. So if you don't bring these discussions, is aethical, not is not unethical. It still means it's an issue, but it doesn't mean that I should feel bad if you haven't been exposed. It's a problem with education. Is a problem when we don't teach AI engineers and data engineers that these things matter. Ethic washing. So I want to go a little bit fast. Ethic washing, like greenwashing. Companies are, hiring people because they want to basically say, oh yeah, sure. I'm accounting for this. And similarly to these, now there are a lot of frameworks out there for AI ethics. And my fear is that people are going to do some ethics shopping. So going to have a look at various AI ethics framework and say, actually, this one is a little bit more permissive or that one is a little bit more, and then specifically use that one. And it's a little bit of a cheeky way of doing things. So don't do ethics shopping in this way. Suggestions. And then I go to the questions. Thanks. I see there are a few already. Again, these are not guidelines. They're just suggestions for you to consider in the last 5 minutes, and then I'm gonna stop talking. Promise. Fair accumulation. Again, what is fair? What is unfair? Is you're not gonna find an answer. You can read books if you want to do in having a look at this, but if you're really interested in this, you should really engage and try to with the developers, with people that are infected, what is fair and unfair. For me, when I started say, okay, what is fair and unfair when it comes to music generation, and I talk to people and go to companies, music industry, stakeholders, listeners, what is fair, what is unfair? Accumulation, right? Just a word that I choose specifically. You want to account for particular needs of the communities that are affected again, positively or negatively by these AI systems. The annotator subjectivities, when I talked before about how just a few people are deciding what is beautiful in Midjourney and others is a problem, right? So account for that. Of course, it's easier because money is a concern. If you're developing a training set, you want maybe the cheapest thing. So you maybe ask people that are around you, your students, your I don't know, like you go on Mechanical Turk, and with low money, you have a number of answers. But again, this is a problem if you want to do things properly. Clearly, the big thing, receive consent for those that create data, remunerate them if you can, or clarify what are the opt-out strategies. The other thing, as I talked before, is documentation. So try to document the process of dataset development. Try to report the intended use of the dataset. Again, sorry to go back to the example of music generation, but it can be generalized. A lot of datasets were originally intended for music transcription. So you take an audio signal and you transcribe as a score or as a MIDI file. Well, these data sets are now being used to create music. Is it okay that you use, that's the next point, maintain the purpose of the original data sets when you're borrowing data? So what was the purpose? So if you put a purpose there as a developer of the data sets, is there should be some mechanism in place so that people that are going to use it can actually say, oh, that was the original purpose. So is it aligned with what I want to do? If it is not, probably shouldn't do that. Of course, we're talking about should or shouldn't is not legal or not legal. In this market where there's so much money has been thrown into AI, a lot of people are going to say, you know what? I don't care. I mean, it's there. They said that, hey, try not to use it for creating music, but you know what? I don't have to. So I don't have to not to do it. So I'm going to do it. That's why I'm talking about what is fair, what is ethical, and I'm not sure among you guys is all people that have this sort of sensitivity. I'm talking about what this part, avoid laissez-faire. Sorry, it's a French word, I don't know how to pronounce it well, but just don't do, or just because other people do it, I'm also gonna do it. Important, try to allow for investigation of the data sets. What are your benefits from doing that? Little, of course, if you think in terms of the monetary advantages, just setting the examples. And again, constantly engage with ethics is something that I want to say, try to volunteer ethical consideration in your data set creation on GitHub or whatever is hosted or when you write a paper. But again, taking care of ethics is a never ending process. So if you want to step into this world, ethics is a priority, like what is data privacy, what is bias, what is transparency, what is accountability, all these sort of facets of ethics is a highly unethical thing. Let aside, people that are a little bit aware of more, you know, AI taking over. That's a little bit early, or I don't even want to talk about it. But you can't separate AI from ethics. So technology is an innovation that definitely requires constant attention. I hope I convince you of that. I think I have that set. Yeah, I just leave this slide for references, and I have my contact details there. Again, these are most of like starting points. This is a great book. It's a book, so if you want to get started, probably I don't know, unless you have time. It's a really good and new one. This is the AI Society paper I wrote that I mentioned before. This is the one on music generation, on the genealogy of learning datasets. Really good one. Is an article. The one that I took some excerpt before, published a couple of years ago, 3 years ago in Big Data and Society. Really good one. Anyway, just go through it if you're interested. And now I'm gonna have a look at the questions, and if you have something else, just add it. Let's see. Yeah, so Nat, yeah, sorry about your that's completely true. So artists are worried, and they are worried because they have the feeling they can't do anything about it. What are you gonna do? You're gonna strike? This it is a big concern for artists, real artists. Other people say, oh no, AI is gonna be great for music, it's gonna open, or visual, it's gonna open all this new creativity. And by the way, I think it's true. Again, remember that I'm a technologist, so I really love, and I think it's extremely elegant, like what's going on with the transformers and everything is beautiful. So it can be useful, but also, what are we trading? What are we trading for? A little bit more creativity there. Um, yeah, sorry, yeah, Siddharth, that's a good point. I think again, I'm not a legal scholar, so I don't know everything about the actual regulations around AI, but the European Union is the let's say, the political body that is moving fastest in this space of trying to regulate AI, and it's definitely to protect data. It's definitely to try to set boundaries and try to stop these free from the taking Wild West scenario that I talked about before. And again, it's not surprising. It's coming from Europe rather than, for instance, places where these are considered less of a problem. Um, oh, I didn't know it was used to evaluate teachers. Thanks, Nat. Um, Social security, yes, social security. Are you capable of having, or even a mortgage? Are you eligible for a mortgage? Yes or no? Is AI deciding that? But what has it been trained on? Who knows? That's another good question. So has AI or other entities have been hold accountable for such practice? If we as humans fail, we are hold accountable, like we are fired, or I don't know, something else happens. If the AI is doing something wrong, I think you can think about the case of the self-driving cars. Self-driving cars, of course, AI everywhere. By the way, that is being used by Uber when you travel. The Tesla drivers are sending constant information to um, Tesla self-driving cars, so that when it comes to collection, but also when accident happened, like did happen last year, a woman was killed by a self-driving car in the United States. I actually don't know who got a liability there, because it's kind of all this drama news. Yeah, it's not really my cup of tea. But yeah, it's complex. So is a developer, the creators of data. Maybe we are responsible in the end. No, it's good questions. A lot of unanswered questions, and yet now these AI models are everywhere. And because again, I don't want to talk about the need versus opportunity. Was there need to judge for ChatGPT? No, nobody asked for ChatGPT to be there. Especially 99% of people are using it, right? Maybe some people using chatbots. But then at one point, OpenAI said, actually, GPT-3 is good enough to be a chatbot, so let's deploy it. And hey, Nat, you have a question so that you
Oh,
no.
nothing. I just misclick and turn my video. You can continue.
Oh yeah, great, great, great. Yeah, thanks for that. It feels a little bit more in a conversation. Yeah, so like these are other things. Did we need music generated with AI? Did we need images generated with Midjourney? These are not even questions, they're rhetoric questions. Right? No, of course not. Like, who needed it? Maybe, yes, some companies that don't have to hire designers, they don't have to hire musicians. But again, are we doing it because to cut off some human labors? And again, I have fun using the systems a lot. I have subscriptions to some of these systems. But again, when the urge for innovation's sakes precedes the need for something, well, then it's something that can be problematic, especially when it's something as potentially disruptive as AI. So again, just something to be aware of, I think. Is there any other question just in the last couple of minutes, or otherwise, again, just feel free to get in touch if there is something that you find interesting, you want to discuss further, or anything. I'm always keen to talk about these things. And otherwise, oh yeah, you have a question, Nat?
Maybe I just want to share my experience, not really a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Uh, I actually am working with a worker union, so I have another job as a unionist. I have
Oh,
been in talk with the Grab driver, and they say that there might be problems where the algorithm for selecting the job for them try to reduce their wage as possible, and in order to make the more profit to the company. On the other end, I have been in talk with the tech company, and they say that the Grab, the Uber has added a lot of value to the society, especially during the pandemic where people need to work from home and
mm.
order food from afar. So on one hand, AI might help us get through the pandemic and optimize the route for more efficiency. But on the other hand, there are workers who suffer from this AI and they don't really have a lot of say to it. And I really agree with you on how do we balance this thing, the usefulness, the gain we get from AI, and some person who actually receive negative result from utilizing in large scale.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. It's a really good point. I feel that unfortunately, I often end up being more on the negative side because, again, I want to rebalance things. But of course, AI can be extremely. When I'm thinking about um, DNA sequencing, like about especially when applied to health and medicine, right? Not maybe necessarily about patients, data, health data patients, like in the state, in the United Kingdom, they privatize health data. of patients. But when it comes about, curing cancer, and everybody's on board. I mean, of course, let's do everything we can. I mean, what are the negative aspects? Well, I can't think of anything, right? What are the negative effects of that? Who's going to lose their job? Some doctors? I don't think so. I think it's going to be, well, yeah, of course, maybe oncologists. If they're out of job, I'm happy. If you don't need oncologists anymore. With all due respect, of course, right? I mean, if we don't need any expert in cancer anymore because we solved it, it's great. But what is its society benefit? Like Uber, problematic in many ways, but yes, he also contributed helping during the pandemic, etc. So yeah, it's a really good point. So trying to be more balanced than me as you engage this, because I struggled. I try to, but oftentimes I end being too much on the negative side. Again, inadvertently, because I really like a lot about AI stuff, both in terms of the technical side and in terms of what can you do with it. So again, now is the hour is over. I think I'm supposed to close here, but again, thanks everyone for joining today, and I wish you a great rest of the day. And again, do feel free to get in touch. The contact detail are here. Oh, this is my website and this is my email. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of the day.